Snow fell in thick, relentless sheets, muffling the forest and bending the tall pines under its weight. The path that led through the mountains had long disappeared, swallowed by whitened shadow, and the world felt reduced to nothing more than wind, cold, and pain. The widow stumbled forward, every step a battle between her will to live and the agony tearing through her body. Her cloak was thin, her hair damp with sweat despite the freezing air, and her breath came out in broken clouds. Another sharp pain seized her, stronger than the last. She cried out and dropped to her knees, pressing both hands to her belly. The child inside her was coming, far too soon and far too far from anyone who could help. Her husband had died months ago, claimed by the same mountains she now crossed, and since then she had learned what it meant to endure alone. But this was more than endurance. This was survival balanced on a knife's edge. Through the swirling snow, she saw it at last, a cabin, dark against the white, smoke curling faintly from its chimney. Hope flared in her chest so suddenly it hurt. She forced herself up, dragging her numb legs forward until she reached the rough wooden wall. The strength left her all at once. She leaned against the cabin, panting, her forehead resting on the cold logs. She raised her fist and knocked. The sound was weak, almost lost to the wind. Inside, the man sat by the fire, unaware that fate was about to cross his threshold. He lived alone by choice, or so he told himself. The mountains did not ask questions, and neither did he. His days were measured by simple things, chopping wood, mending tools, listening to the quiet. When the knock came, he frowned, convinced at first that the storm was playing tricks on him. Then it came again. He stood slowly, hand drifting to the door latch, every instinct warning him that trouble rarely arrived politely in winter. He opened the door just enough to look out and froze. A woman stood there, or rather leaned there, her body shaking, her face drawn and pale. Snow clung to her clothes, and her eyes lifted to meet his with a mixture of fear and pleading that struck deeper than words. "I'm hurting," she said, her voice barely louder than the wind. "Please, let me give birth in your cabin." For a long moment, he did not respond. He had not planned for this. He had not planned for anyone. His life was quiet because he had made it so, because quiet did not leave scars. Yet here she was, heavy with child, alone in a storm that would kill her before morning if he turned her away. Another pain hit her, and she cried out, doubling over. Her knees buckled, and she would have fallen if the wall had not held her up. That was when he moved. He opened the door wide and stepped forward, catching her before she slid into the snow. She was lighter than he expected, fragile in a way that frightened him. He guided her inside, shutting the door firmly behind them as the storm raged on the other side, angry at being denied. The warmth of the cabin wrapped around her like a blessing. She sagged against him, gasping, tears streaking her cheeks. He helped her to a low bench near the fire, easing her down as carefully as he could. The fire crackled, throwing orange light across the rough-hewn walls, and for the first time in hours, she was not freezing. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching her belly as another wave of pain passed. "I didn't know where else to go." He nodded, unsure what to say. Words had never been his strength. He poured water into a cup and handed it to her with hands that felt clumsy and too large. She drank greedily, then rested her head back, eyes closed, breathing through the pain. He studied her in silence. There was a quiet dignity about her, even now, even broken by exhaustion and fear. The lines of hardship were etched into her face, but so was determination. This was not a woman who gave up easily. "How far along?" he asked at last, his voice rough from disuse. "Enough," she replied faintly. "Enough that the baby won't wait." The reality of it settled heavily in the room. He had delivered animals before, out of necessity, but a human life was something else entirely. Still, the thought of sending her back into the storm was unthinkable. Whatever came next, they would face it here. Another contraction gripped her, stronger, longer. She cried out, fingers digging into the edge of the bench. He instinctively knelt beside her, placing a steadying hand near her shoulder, not quite touching at first, then gently resting it there when she did not pull away. "You're safe," he said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "The storm won't take you tonight." She opened her eyes and looked at him, really looked at him, as if anchoring herself to something solid in a world that was slipping. She nodded, clinging to his words as much as to the warmth of the fire. Outside, the wind screamed and the snow continued to fall, but inside the cabin, time seemed to slow. The first stage of her labor stretched on, each pain testing her limits. He stayed with her, feeding the fire, fetching more water, listening when she spoke of her husband in broken sentences, how he had promised to be there, how life had other plans. When the pain eased briefly, she rested, her breathing shallow but steady. The man sat nearby, keeping watch, aware that his quiet life had just been irrevocably interrupted. Yet as he looked at the woman and the life she carried, he felt something shift inside him, a sense that this interruption might be the most important thing that had ever happened within these walls. The storm continued its assault on the cabin, but it no longer felt like an enemy. It felt like a boundary, sealing them off from the rest of the world, forcing two strangers together at the edge of something terrifying and miraculous. And as the widow gripped her belly once more, bracing herself for what was coming, the man rose and prepared himself as well, knowing there would be no turning back now. Night settled deeply around the cabin, pressing close to its walls as the storm continued to rage beyond them. Inside, the fire burned steadily, its warmth pushing back the cold and casting long, flickering shadows across the room. The widow's strength was fading, but her resolve held firm. Each breath she took was measured, deliberate, as though she were drawing courage from the air itself. The man moved quietly, almost reverently, as if any sudden sound might shatter the fragile balance that had formed between them. He added wood to the fire, adjusted the blanket around her shoulders, and kept his voice calm even when fear stirred in his chest. He had never imagined himself in such a moment. Solitude had been his armor for years, yet now it lay useless at his feet. "You're doing well," he said softly, though he had no way of measuring it. The words felt right, and that was enough. She nodded faintly, sweat beading on her forehead despite the chill beyond the walls. Another surge of pain rose, stronger than before, and she cried out, gripping the edge of the bench. He stayed close, grounding her with his presence. When she reached out blindly, he took her hand without hesitation. Her grip was tight, desperate, and he did not pull away. Hours passed in fragments, pain, rest, whispered words, silence. Time no longer moved in a straight line. The cabin became its own small world, existing only for this struggle and the quiet determination that filled the air. The widow spoke between waves of exhaustion, telling him about her husband, about how he used to hum when he worked, how he had wanted to build a larger home before winter came. Her voice trembled, but she spoke as if saying his name aloud kept him close. "He would have been afraid," she said with a weak, almost sad smile. "But he would have stayed." The man listened, absorbing every word. He did not interrupt or offer comfort he could not give. Sometimes listening was the only honest thing a person could do. As the night wore on, the storm began to change. The wind lost some of its sharpness, and the snowfall softened, though it did not stop. The fire crackled, steady and faithful. The widow's breathing grew heavier, her focus narrowing to what lay immediately ahead. Whatever doubts the man had carried earlier were gone now. There was no room for fear, only action. When the baby finally arrived, it happened not with drama, but with a suddenness that stole his breath. One moment there was only effort and pain, and the next there was sound, a small, unmistakable cry that cut through the quiet like a bell. For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then the widow began to sob, tears streaming freely down her face, her entire body shaking with relief and disbelief. The man felt his chest tighten, emotions rising that he had long buried under routine and distance. He wrapped the child carefully in a clean cloth, his movements slow and deliberate, as though the tiniest mistake might break something sacred. The baby's cry softened, then steadied, filling the cabin with life. She reached out, arms trembling, and he placed the child against her. Her expression changed instantly, pain giving way to wonder. She touched the baby's face with one finger, as if afraid the moment might vanish if she pressed too hard. "You're here," she whispered. "You're really here." The man stepped back, giving them space, yet he could not take his eyes away. The cabin, once empty and silent, now held something profoundly alive. It felt different, full in a way he had never known. He cleaned quietly, keeping himself useful, grounding his emotions in simple tasks. Outside, the storm eased further, the wind retreating into the trees. Dawn was still far off, but the worst had passed. When he finally looked back at the widow, she was watching him with gratitude so deep it made him uncomfortable. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. "If you hadn't opened the door." He shook his head. "You don't owe me anything." The words surprised him as much as they seemed to surprise her. He realized he meant them completely. This was not charity or obligation. It was something else, something human. As the hours slipped toward morning, exhaustion claimed them both. He built up the fire once more and laid another blanket nearby, keeping watch while she slept, the baby nestled close. He sat in his chair, listening to their breathing, steady and calm. The sound filled the cabin, replacing years of silence. Light finally crept through the frost-edged window, pale and hesitant. The storm had broken, leaving the world outside blanketed in quiet white. The man rose and looked out briefly, then back at the two souls who had come into his life unannounced and undeniable. When the widow woke, the first thing she saw was daylight. The second was the man standing nearby, holding a cup of warm water. "You're safe," he said simply. "Both of you." She smiled, tired but peaceful, and nodded. The fear that had driven her through the storm was gone now, replaced by something gentler, stronger. She did not know what the future held, but she knew this kindness had found her when she needed it most. The man looked around his cabin, at the fire, the light, the quiet presence of new life, and understood that opening his door had changed more than just one night.